I like to make every moment meaningful if I can, and I'm grateful to them for their leniency. Certainly the second time around, because I had to compromise my job at one point because I was living with someone where the balance, so they were also autistic and some other neurodivergencies going on, and during COVID as well, everyone's clumped together, and it just made it too difficult to balance everything else at home with the job. So, but when I went back, the most recent time, which I can't remember what the year was again, it's a bit fuzzy, but they were extremely lenient, and I think it's because they knew now better than they did, and I think it was a few new people as well working with me. But yeah, I can't fault them really. But yeah, that first time around, it was my first ever job. Just I had a lot of meltdowns, but a few minutes away, just so you can focus on working longer, knowing that the probationary period that maybe typically people would succeed within, you may need to extend that, because yeah, it did take me longer than I think it was 3 months that I was supposed to be doing the job by, but I think I lasted a bit. They extended it a little bit for me, and once I got it, I was helping other people out. I was loving it, but it's a flexible workplace to make it that way.
Welcome to You've Got Game, the podcast that's all about playing to win in life. I'm your host, Marisa Kamal, and I'm thrilled to be your guide on this journey. On this show, I'll be talking to a range of guests who faced adversity head on and come out on top. We'll be diving into their stories, uncovering the secrets of how they overcame their challenges, and learning from their hard-won wisdom. From entrepreneurs to artists, athletes to activists, our guests have one thing in common: they've got game. So come along for the ride as we explore the strategies, mindsets, and habits of those who are thriving against all odds. Are you ready to play? Let's do this. So this week I am super excited to introduce to you all Callum Brazzo. He's an autistic performance poet and founder of Aut-Couture, and he's also my amazing brother-in-law, I think, if I've got that right. You're my husband's brother-in-law? Right. Thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So let's get started. Can you tell me, so I kind of know your story, but there's loads of it that's still untapped for me. But in a nutshell, can you give us your story? Take us back to little Callum Brazzo.
Yeah, so for me, my story can be told through the metaphor and physical situation of being in a corner, feeling socially in a corner, but literally in primary school. I remember playing with my fingers as a child, and just being content, happy as Larry, as the expression goes, just doing your own thing, wrestling with my fingers. And I really like this. My thumb was the head. I had it completely in my head of what I was doing. But I think to people, teachers, other pupils, my dad maybe, that was an issue, because I was do you have any friends? No, shouldn't you be being with other people? And I was completely fine. I was like, no, I'm good. So I suppose that's the most significant memory from primary school, just that period just being fairly straightforward for me. But at secondary school, jumping forward obviously, but in secondary school I had this conscious shift of, well, I don't think how these people are thinking, like my peers, quote unquote peers, and I'm not able or willing to interact like you are, talk about what you're talking about. I don't care about what you're talking about. And even if I try, there's a lot of gossip. So I felt that people were taking the sympathy approach with me and trying to be my friend, owning some life on my face. And I never really knew what people's true intentions were. So even if I wanted to communicate, I was in this double-edged sword of, well, it's difficult anyway, so I may as well just stick to myself. And but the big thing that really changed my life during that time was poetry. So my parents were going through a divorce at the time, and I'm unrelated, but not helped either. I was bullied for the reason I mentioned. I've also got Tourette's, so I was ticking, and people used to make fun of that. And I also had dreadlocks when I was about 14, which if I had dreadlocks now, I'd love it. But it's the whole process of going like the messy stage of dreadlocks to get to where they need to be where I would want them to be. But back then, people would make fun of me for that as well, and I wasn't mentally where I needed to be to pull it off, I guess. So all these things accumulated into this depression and struggles to leave my house at one point, and because I was scared that people would see me in town and bully me, and I didn't really defend myself much. I completely avoided conflict, but poetry was always my escape and my communication throughout all of this. So I was just used to spend so much time in class just writing, being a bit cheeky to teachers as well, but I wasn't really saying anything. I was just nonchalant about everything. I was just like, oh, well, why are you not listening, Callum? So they sent me to what was called isolation at the time. I don't know if it still exists.
Wow. I hope it doesn't still exist. That sounds awful.
It sounds awful, but for me, it was actually quite like, oh, okay, isolation, away from people, away from idiots. Let's go. I was a truant as well. I used to spend some times in the bathrooms, not going to class, if I even got to school, this is what I was doing. Truanting, that's the word. Being a truant in the bathrooms, writing. So I'm not really engaged when I'm at school. And eventually, I got to the point where Dad took me out into an alternative setting called the For Real program, and it was a Boston college. So I finished essentially without GCSEs. I've got GCSE equivalents at this place in Boston near me, and that's where again things stepped up another level, because I had a smorgasbord of skills that I developed through these experiences. The timeline's a bit fuzzy because again my mental space wasn't, when you're in depression you don't think, oh, when was I at this point? You just think, get me out of this hell. Or you don't have that attitude back then. You're in this bubble. But I do know that I went on the Princess Trust course at one point, which provided me with a certain set of skills and experiences. I dabbled in a media course, a music performance course, and yeah, it's interesting that looking back, like just like the dreadlocks, really, thinking that if I was afforded these opportunities now, what I would do with them. But you can't have these regrets. Not that I would have regrets, but it's certainly interesting to look back now and think, oh, what would I have done sat in a room with other musicians and me being the poet that I then became? Because it's very different going from writing to then, oh, I can get up and perform these things. It's a very different mindset. And I really wish, every time I tell this kind of story about myself, I just think, I wish I knew where that switch was, when that switch happened, where I went from writing out of necessity to then writing to tell my story, to actively go out and perform these things. It's very, very weird. But yeah, that's the summary.
Well, thank you, Callum. That's so interesting. And it's crazy to think that, you've gone from, I guess this timid little boy who's felt like he's had to hide away, to now you don't just like perform. You've done multiple kind of spoken word and poetry events, but you've also done a TEDx talk, which I had the pleasure of sitting through. So, I mean, how did you even get to that stage? Can you tell us a bit more?
Well, gosh. So it just happened. This is a theme in my life, really. I just go for things. I don't. We might talk about this later, but my group that I started, that was all on a whim because there was nothing else. But the column that I ran for 3 years just started because I just put myself out there. Like, is there a space for this? yes, as long as you can keep it going, cool, that's all I need. And the same was with the TEDx talk. It was just they're having applications being put forward, and I just went for it, and off you go. But then it's I remember before I went on stage, I really needed a toilet. But the difference with, because I did 2 videos for the TEDx event, so originally I'd thought about putting it all as one, but time limits I think made it better that there were 2 videos. So there was one poem that I did, and there was one TEDx talk, as it were. With the talk, it was difficult because up to this point, I'd given a few presentations on my story and performed and this and that, but it's more free flowing, because when you're, hopefully you never find out, or maybe if you want to find out what a TEDx talk is like, but in front of you there was like this timer, like if I recall correctly, there's this timer where, and it's got what you've got. It was like memorizing this big old poem, but it was a talk. So there was a lot of pressure I felt. I don't normally feel pressure performing, because for me, it's I've got something to say. And if I haven't got something to say personally, it's now about me taking the voices of my community and amplifying them. Whereas with this talk, it was like, I need to get to this point by a certain time, otherwise my talk's just done. So it was quite a high pressure situation, honestly, but I think I pulled it off.
Yeah, you did. It was the best TEDx talk I've ever seen, and I'll definitely share it with this community and the listeners afterwards. It was just amazing. I was blown away by it. So, Callum, can you tell me how autism shaped your understanding of yourself, and also the world around you? Big topic.
Yeah, the start and stop of it all is it's everything. It is absolutely every interaction, every thought and feeling, just everything. So I discovered I had it confirmed when I was 21. I'm 31 now. So I fairly recently celebrated my 10-year Aut-Couture, which is something I do. It's meaningful, because that's a whole other subject, because why would you celebrate being autistic? Well, it's because it means so much often when you are diagnosed, because it's a relief. And there are people out there that feel bitter towards being misunderstood for so long. For me, it was more the former of just, I remember crying when I was diagnosed, and just, okay, this is me then, cool. So I mean, moving forward, it shapes my relationships, the workplaces that I've been involved in, the jobs that I've had, and there are pros and cons to both. And I'm autistic positive, but I'm all about promoting the autistic identity as something positive, because you hear too much of the other narrative, or many other narratives are negative. But I will say that practical supports, I would never excuse practical supports, but for me, the key is when there is support that's necessary, because I haven't got here by myself. My dad has been my massive, has been a platform that I've been able to rise from, and rise from that corner and speak for myself. There was a time when I was going, there's so many family occasions I've been where I was not speaking, and now we've got to a point my dad will sometimes forget, I think, that, Cal's here, like he can like, there have been times says, I don't need to anymore, but there was definitely a time when I was not as independent, and so that affected as well workplaces. And my first job was when I was 23, same time that I left the family home, which, if we're measuring by what's typical, that's not typical. People move out much sooner than that, and I was still at home, and seeing my neurotypical, to my knowledge, my neurotypical brother, he had a very different and more typical journey, I would say, and which is always interesting. But even so, I remember sibling teasing, for example, again, something that most people don't think about. For me, that was, I think I was more sensitive, and I do attribute that to me being autistically minded and not really wanting to be, again, same with the school situation. People would like football and all these typical sports. I was never like that. So having my brother tease me and him not thinking anything of it, fair play to him. But for me, it definitely did affect me differently. Not any traumatic, there was no trauma. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but yeah, certainly it was a different experience for me than it would be for other people. And relationships, most of my relationships, in fact, all of them have started through being online at first, because meeting people in person has never been good for me. So, but I don't think I've ever seen myself, and I say this in my TED talk, I suffered, but I never suffered from being autistic. I suffered from how other people treated me and their perceptions. I've suffered from depression, because that's something you suffer from. But again, I've never looked at myself. I've never had this moment of, even in school, even like where I think, this blimmin', especially when I was diagnosed autistic, so I knew what's going on. I never took that as, I blimmin' hate being autistic because it makes me think. Like, I've always been this, well, if you don't get me, you don't get me. You're not the person for me then. So you need to reshape that narrative, but it takes time, I guess.
Yeah. No, I love that. And thank you for being so open and honest. And you sort of touched on it then, but can you just give me, like, what's your superpower then?
See, I would not say I have a superpower. I think you can be a bog standard autistic person, and that's completely fine. I think there's this idea out there that we have to have superpowers and we have to be geniuses. And I think what that can do for the autistic community and the wider community, not just the neurotypical community, is it can put people on a pedestal. And it might seem like I'm putting autistic people down by saying just a bog standard autistic, but I think it's
everyone's different.
Yeah, and it's everyone's different, and we should have a society that builds around those differences. It shouldn't be that we have to be a genius so a society can use us. Oh, well, we're useful to you now because we fit into what you think is valuable. It should be like, oh, I like gaming and that's all I like, for example. It's not me, but I'm talking about someone else. Whatever. Someone, it's all they do is gaming. Okay, how can we make that work in our society? Well, there's game development, there's comic books, maybe there's website design, there's all this different stuff you can think about, rather than, oh, let's get them out of the gaming room because they're not socializing. That's superimposing standards that don't necessarily need to be there. So I think the same applies to superpowers. Like, let's just make it work. Let's make a whole world that works for everybody.
Yeah. So, I love that, because you often. No, I really like it, and thanks for the explanation. Because you often see like lots of posts on LinkedIn, particularly, and people say, "Oh, like, this is my neurodiversity, and this is how it works for me, and it's my superpower," which is also lovely to see that, because I think sometimes you need kind of like beacons that bring that. But it's great to get the other side, which is, would you ask the question to a neurotypical person? Maybe I wouldn't, So. No, it's great. Thank you. But you did touch on something there that I'd like to explore in terms of society. How would you like to see society to adapt to be more inclusive, I guess?
One big thing that I would like to push for is there's an autistic advocate called Autisticality, and they are a situationally mute autistic. So it used to be selective mutism, but it's actually situational mutism, because different situations will bring stress around, and stress can make you lose words for that situation. I've actually had it at work one time. It's very, very weird, but it happens. There's this advocate out there called Autisticality, and they've got a resource called Autistic Profiles, and they're on Instagram. They've got a website. I think they're there everywhere you can think of. except maybe LinkedIn. I don't know so much about that, but I
There will
think
be.
they probably.
I'll take a look, but I think that most people are, most companies are, and charities and stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, these profiles are 3 pages that you can print out and staple together, and it's just questions around what you might need support with, what you prefer to do independently, and it's a simple idea. But if you put that in workplaces and schools and just made it apply to everyone, because neurodiversity is everyone's brain, then you would remove this sense of us versus them. Like April is Autistic Acceptance Month, and that's great. But like with all these things, it's a month, and we should be working towards past this month. I think that's the way to, if you really want to embrace neurodiversity, which there's no reason why we can't, because the information is out there. And I recommend Dr. Nick Walker on neurodiversity. Their website is neuroqueer.com. I don't mean to throw stuff at you, but all these little things just help us understand neurodiversity and how we can actually, like with the profiles, just put that everywhere rather than, the profiles, but also being selfish, I suppose, bringing it back to myself. It's about putting autistic people in positions of influence where appropriate, just tokenistically, but just in. And I'm in a privileged position being a poet, because not everyone wants to stand there and talk and wants to be that bridge. But I very much consider myself socially responsible for being that bridge between the autistic community and the wider community. So I think we just need, and this applies to just getting speakers into workplaces. But I do think that true change happens when you almost apply this, whatever it is, the profile, something to everybody. Neurodiversity is everybody.
That sounds like a great resource. I'll look at it, and I'll also tag it in with this so that the listeners can take a look. But that sounds like a really amazing idea. And the same with, I see it as diversity and inclusion more broadly. It's bringing people to the table to talk and have a voice, right from the top, if we're talking about organizations or community groups, but right from the top, all the way through the organization to the bottom. So it's actually a representation of the society that we live in, not a sector of people that, aren't representative of that society. So that makes sense. And I'll definitely take a look at those resources and share them. Thank you. Can you so you talked a little bit then about corporate culture, I guess. Can you talk to a little bit about the challenges that you faced with some of the jobs that you've had, and what helped, how you overcame them?
Yeah. So the situation where I couldn't speak, just that was because of the pressure of being looked over. So someone was looking over their shoulder, looking over my shoulder at my work, and it was in a factory. And the sensory hell of the gloves that you have to put on for health and safety reasons, I understand it, but just the original sensation of that, and the food that slippery, it just made me like, it's just awful. And when you're working in a factory, you have to work to get certain orders out, like certain amounts of orders. So it's a tough one to balance, really, because they need to get the orders out. They can't necessarily spend loads of time on someone that can't cope with that. They need to get the orders out to these big companies. But in my experience, they did spend, well, I was able to step away for 5, 10. I think eventually I stepped away for quite a long time. I had quite a few step aways from the area I was working. But that's what I needed to de-stress. And then I was able to go back in. And also, once I get something, I really, like, by the end of my experience working at this specific place, I was able to, so I was making wraps. So I was able to make wraps one-handed and blindfolded and with my eyes closed and really have fun with it, not to the detriment of getting the actual work done. Again, I'm not silly, I'm going to lose my job. But I do like to see, I like to make every moment meaningful if I can. And I'm grateful to them for their leniency, especially the second time around, because I had to compromise my job at one point because I was living with someone where the balance, so they were also autistic and some other neurodivergencies going on, and during COVID as well, everyone's clumped together, and it just made it too difficult to balance everything else at home with the job. So, but when I went back, the most recent time, which I can't remember what the year was, again, it's a bit fuzzy, but they were extremely lenient, and I think it's because they knew now better than they did. And I think it was a few new people as well working with me, but yeah, I can't fault them really. But yeah, that first time around, it was my first ever job. Just I had a lot of meltdowns, but a few minutes away, just so you can focus on working longer, knowing that the probationary period that maybe typically people succeed within, you may need to extend that, because yeah, it did take me longer than I think it was 3 months that I was supposed to be doing the job by, but I think I lasted a bit. They extended it a little bit for me, and once I got it, I was helping other people out. I was loving it, but it's a flexible workplace to make it that way.
Yeah, I remember how challenging that was for you, and then seeing you through that period and actually, like going on to like really thrive and love it there. So it's like, yeah, great. Has there been any managers that you've had or anyone else that you felt has kind of really supported you, and what did they do differently?
Well, I mean, there's someone that I used to work with that's still my friends now. Luke, shout out to Luke if you ever watch this. He's always had my back, and just I appreciate the allyship that he's provided, and I think that is a really important example of people supporting, but not from a place of pity, from a place of empowerment. Because you can I've got great neurotypical allies in my life, present company included, but in my wider life as well. But because not just like people, but people are people, and not every autistic person will get on. Fully aware of that. Running my own group, I completely understand that. The journeys are different. So there's a lot of unpacking to do in terms of the trauma that they might have, and they might not see it how you see it. And then being autistic, you might get zoned into one specific thing, which then might isolate other people that don't have that certain way of thinking. So Luke is just a great example of people that have had my back, just laughing with me whilst we're working, and and I cannot remember the lady's name, but there was a lady who was a manager that was really nice. And actually, the night shift manager called Lucas, who's since left, he was really nice.
I'm sure you're a real pleasure to work with, Cal. I know you've talked about, kind of, I remember you were learning a bit of Polish because there was quite a big, was it Polish community? And you were sort of learning some words in Polish and really going the extra mile as well. So, you're an ally yourself.
Yeah, Polish, a bit of Lithuanian I learned. I think the Bulgarian, and people would come in and not know what to do. So I would take it upon myself to learn a bit of their language to again bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And the funniest part was when they replied back to me in like full sentences, and all I was trying to do was just bridge the gap, not make like a moat between us, a massive bridge. Yeah, I'd say it was good. I mean, that's kind of the person I am. Just tried to bridge that gap. Yeah, I mean, just speaking calmly to me helps. And yeah, just looking beyond the baseline, because I remember someone, to give you a contrast, someone called me lazy once, and I really got upset and really angry actually during work time. And it's because I was having the sensory issues I previously spoke about. But you don't see that. All this person saw was the person who's not doing their job, getting the orders out. Why are you so lazy? So why aren't you doing your work? And that is exactly the opposite is what I need. It's like I need someone to say, what's going on? Do you need to step away? Just a calm approach, because there's always something going on. So yeah, moving forward, I guess long term in the workplace, that kind of thing helps.
Yeah, it's about being open and just discussing with you beforehand, because you're an open book, right? You talk about everything so honestly as well. So if you have requirements in a certain role, then you're happy to talk about it as well. You're not shy. It's just about people going to that and seeking to understand, rather than like jumping the gun and making assumptions like you're lazy. And I hope you resolved that situation. You were able to talk to them and explain. Or
I mean, we're not friends, but we're not enemies either.
Yeah.
One of their friends I got quite close with actually brought me some Bulgarian food. Just like, try some, because it reminded me of my dad, because he's always trying to connect with cultures. I'll try your food, and I'll do this, do that. We spend so much time talking about him, but yeah, it was so. I think maybe there was just a culture. What do they call culture clash of they're maybe used to not to be culturalist. That's not even a word, is it? But, not to be stereotypical. But I do think that they were, just from knowing them, that they were maybe used to hard work and just getting through it. And then they saw me as like, well, why aren't you doing it? Everyone else is doing it, and actually makes things a lot worse, because a lot of people don't want to be there.
It didn't necessarily come with bad intention, but the impact of how it made you feel wasn't positive.
Yeah.
So Callum, you're up to loads in your life, and you've been up to loads. Can you tell us kind of what you've got on at the moment, or what have been your biggest achievements?
Everything past secondary school.
Love that. No, I love that. What a great attitude to have, and a positive reflection on your life since you were that must be 16.
I mean, that's it really. I mean, it's just not being able, or being taxied to college, to this place that was the alternative setting. I was taxied there, and because I wouldn't take the bus, because I was get rid on the bus. So anything past those dark moments is a win for me. That's genuinely how I see it, and I like to keep where I've been in my mind, because it just grounds me. I don't think I'll ever be. I don't think I've got space in my brain to be this person that suddenly forgets where they came from. It's what, 20 years ago now, maybe, and it's still like fresh, because you just have to remember. And especially as a poet, I never I never wrote to make a book, but I've got a book that is in its last iteration. I want to make a new book, which
but it's
is not.
amazing actually, because your book, we've got I think we've got 2 copies definitely, but your book, there's poems in there from when you were young, right? So it's so good that you've got them over such a long period of time, because it really, if you get the book, it really does just tell your story through poems, and some of them are really sad, and then some of them are really kind of express lots of love and are really beautiful in a different way. So you really have sort of expressed your emotions through poetry for a long time, as you described at the start.
Yeah, and it's all a bit creatively stifled now, but I'm happy. So,
yeah. But talk about your pictures. Can you tell us about your pictures? So people people who are watching this on video, Callum literally has how much of your artwork do you have on the wall behind you, Cal?
all that I can fit. So here I'll go around, but I've got the autistic pride flag hanging up there. It's literally everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I'm a great lover of painting, abstractly, I should say. So I've got this one here.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry,
looks great.
I just dropped you. Sorry, YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. I'm sorry again for walking around so much. I walk around a lot. If you're listening to it, there's no issue. So this, thank you. I'll just do a quick quiz round. Yes, this one was made of talcum powder with some friends. Just crazy. This one was made with my partner at the time, which we ended up going separate ways, as I alluded to earlier. But I mean, that one means a lot to me. This one is the autistic pride, autistic infinity symbol. Sorry, being autistic, awesome, love it. There's so many more I could talk about.
Maybe we don't need to go through all of them, but they are beautiful.
Maybe not.
So yeah, you've kind of found an outlet in painting as well, and you have your community. Can you tell us about that? Your group?
Yeah, so the group is called Autistic Led, and I came prepared. That I know that was backwards, or it's backwards to me. But yeah,
Callum's pointing to his t-shirt which says Autistic Led for anyone on listening on Spotify.
Yes, I was pointing to a t-shirt. It was actually through Aut-Couture, but I'll park that thought right there, because yeah, the group started in October 2018, and just there was nothing for the people that are coming. It started with literally one person who's still there as a member, and we've got about 50 people on Facebook and WhatsApp. And I knew going into it that it was going to be important to have a range of ways to connect. Not everyone does phone calls, so it's okay. So how do you communicate then? And again, I have those profiles that I mentioned, that group that people can maybe pick up, and some people have. I just share resources. I share stims, free stims. So stims are anything that you might use to regulate emotions, just because, as well. It doesn't have to be a negative emotion. If you're regulating for that purpose, you just do it like a hand flap is a stim, like you're stimming there to just because it feels good, or maybe to regulate if you're stressed. So I give those out, free biscuits, which, that's the real reason everyone comes.
It's the real reason we all go to meetings.
yeah, a lot of good things are talked about over biscuits and coffee and tea. Yeah. But it's different. And I have a firm understanding of that too, is that an autistic social group, which I suppose essentially what it is, will look different. And I remember being told by a neurotypical person that's come into the group to have support at the time. I remember them saying to me, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. And you have to strike a balance, because yes, people don't like to just do nothing, but in the same token, and I think in this situation it was more, well, it's very clear you're trying to, again, impose your neurotypical standards of what a group should look like. And just because they don't have eye contact going on, and they're not necessarily even talking, they're just happy to be there, that's enough. For a lot of people back then, it was enough, I feel, because just finding other people that they can talk to, and sometimes related, sometimes not, but just to be there is an achievement in itself. So yeah, I mean, it's still going. I'm finding it's footing financially long term, but that's a whole other journey. But that's I mean, it's all exciting to me, because for the longest time the group operated under a neurotypical charity. That's all well and good, but again, the future is not. It's not just a name, autistic led. I'm trying to do what I think we should do. Same with what we were talking about with workplaces and putting autistic people at the table. Is that it's about having my dream is for members to run almost like branches of the group, so like put them in power, empower them to run it themselves as much as possible. And if they're not the right fit for the job, that's fine. But I remember being told a lot of no's, and it was just a no because they're scared of the red tape, and I get that as well. But again, we should be reframing that narrative as much as possible of, okay, well, how can we make the system fit other people rather than make them fit into the system?
Yeah. What I love about you as well is you never accept no. You always ask, like, you need to, and rightly so, like, understand the rationale as to why, and not just like kind of like because it didn't work before. It's like, okay, well, why didn't it work before, and why can't we do it this way? And you're always pushing that agenda, and that's why you've managed to keep the group going for such a number of years, and also, you know, push past the challenges that you've had with the neurotypical charity, and you're building your own community and something looking potentially towards the council to fund, which we won't go into. But thanks, Callum. Can you tell us a bit about your t-shirt business then, CEO?
Yeah, so that was started with my dear beloved brother. But I remember, I mean, the story is on the website, aut-couture.tmail.com. But
I'll share it.
I will summarize here. I remember my friend saying, "Oh, I thought all the designs were yours," and I had to say, "Oh, well, some of them are Aaron, some are mine. Aaron's my brother." But I felt that I needed to do this for myself, and I think I've got this deep rooted, which I think my dad's described. I will get back to Aut-Couture, I promise. But I've got this deep rooted. It does relate to Aut-Couture, really. Is that I've got this deep rooted desire to do things for myself that stems from having so much done for me, like dad speaking for me, for being overly protective, not my dad, but my other people in my family, to where it wasn't helpful for me in multiple ways. So I think I've got this desire to so when this question was posed to me, I felt a bit of imposter syndrome. So although it started, and he is still my wonderful brother is still a massive part of things. And in the on the website, I described him as the filter, because Aut-Couture started. See, I tried to get back to it in a queue for Costa. So I was waiting for coffee, and I just really get stressed out with queues because people stand so close to you. Again, one of those simple things people don't think about, but for me, it's really stressful, and I get really feeling quite angry in times. And I went home and had this. I've got it on me actually. This shirt, and I got this marker pen, and I just put. I think it's like, please respect my space. I'm autistic, and I think I shared it online. I mean, Aaron was saying, well, if you're going to do it, Cal, maybe do it like refine my ideas. It's a good idea, but it did look like I was in art class, which is fine. But it was just the thoughts went from that moment of, okay, what can we do with this? So then Aut-Couture was formed, and I'm going through T-Mill, which is wonderful. Again, we talk about allyship, neurotypical allies, and I mean, T-Mill might be run by an autistic person for all I know. I don't know, but in a way, it speaks to that idea of being an ally, because it helps that I make the designs, and then you go through T-Mill. I have to make a significant amount of money for me to make it beneficial for myself. So whilst there's ease of access and ease of, like, creatively, it's easy for me to put something forward. If we're talking business, it also makes it difficult, because having someone else involved that you're not there day to day with them, it's a site. Mm-hmm. to be able to grow is a ongoing, shall we say? But I'm here for it. It just takes it's not something I can take on the road, because I have to order from my own money stock at a discount. But for me to go to these events I want to do, to show off the clothing I have and the messages that I'm so proud of, it takes financial output. So it's just this constant balance. But the clothing's really all about conversation starters. So one that I can bring attention to is called Self-Diagnosed Badass, which
I've seen that one on someone as well.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. Which I've actually, obviously, I've bought a lot of what I put out, because I think you have to be a fan of your own stuff, and that's the difference for me with small business, which is what I consider Aut-Couture. Mm-hmm. Well, I know it is, but I think that's the difference. Is you can put so much passion into it. I'm always about passion and people before product. Yeah. And I've locked into both, but with Aut-Couture. But Self-Diagnosed Badass, obviously, if you think you're a bit of a badass, it'll make you laugh. But autistic, then self-diagnosis, it almost it's a wink and a nod to that being valid, because the diagnostic process isn't always the fastest. So it's about recognizing those nuances, if you recognize them, but also just reaching a broader community of, oh, I'm a badass, I'll get that. So it's like, again, being that bridge.
Yeah. No, I love those t-shirts, and anyone can buy them actually all over the country, can't they? They're available online. And I'll share the link, and you can take a look for yourselves, but I'd recommend, talk about allyship. They're good for anyone to wear. But the messages that you've got in there, they're great. Amazing artwork skills as well in some of the designs. Thanks so much, Cal. Look, I've really enjoyed this conversation, as our listeners will have done. I think actually the points that you've provided will be, resonate with a lot of people, but also practically you've given us some stuff that people can implement in their day-to-day life and more broadly within organizations and communities. I'm going to dig into some of the materials that you talked about, and I'll include them with the podcast and, start looking into that in a bit of a bigger way, more generally, in just the way that I approach LinkedIn, my business, and potentially a path that I want to follow. Just one last question. Can you please tell me why you've got game?
I wrote a little poem.
Go for it.
Called You've Got Game.
I love that. Thank you for taking the time to do that, because this isn't rehearsed, but I know it's like one of the key questions that I ask in every episode. I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. Here we go. They played me for a fool because I wasn't operating by the rules other people at school were abiding by. I was figuring out the world in this mind of mine. And there's a nuanced kind of strife when it's internal, but it's cool. Poetry was my tool. and they were never going to be defining my existence, and my rhymes were lifelines, and I survived. So now it's time to thrive, in spite of perceived blockades, assumptions made based on my unorthodox brain. Nah, today the world's a stage, and I stand in reflection and say, you've got game.
That's like mega badass. I love it. Thanks so much, Cal. I don't think anyone's going to be able to beat that. I definitely won't, and I'm already figuring out how I can turn it into like the theme tune of the whole podcast. I love it. That's epic. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thanks so much. Thank you.
And look, thanks so much, and maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. But yes, appreciate it. Lots of love.
All right.